think what's currently playing out is, can you afford to be married, or can you afford to date, or if you're not economically feasible, you are disqualified and disfranchised from developing authentic, dare I say, intimate relationships.
Right.
And my heart goes out to the cat that's working hard, doing what he knows to do best. May not be making six figures, but it's the best he's doing. He's grinding, and only be met by a construct of masculinity that says he's not good enough.
Welcome back for another conversation, man. I'm excited about this one. We all know manhood doesn't always have to look the same for everyone, and real strength lies in authenticity and personal truth. So join us as we explore what real men think, how we feel, and how we navigate the complexities of modern masculinity. Today's guest, man, is what we call a conceptual architect, your neighborhood inspiration dealer, the founder of Office Devotionals. And there's a lot of other things we could talk about: a community activist, a leader, a minister, law school graduate, Mr. DeAntoine Moy. What's happening, D?
Man, privileged to be here, my brother. So privileged to be here with you, bro.
Oh man, I'm privileged to have you. Privileged to have this conversation. I think, the reality is we have some history together. We've worked together on projects. We've traveled together. We've been a part of a few different things. Obviously, went to school together. But I think what's most exciting about this conversation is obviously you've seen even my journey. I've seen your journey, being able to see a lot of what we've gone throughout that experience. There's a lot of things that have changed from at this point, we've known each other, 15 years?
Yeah,
somewhere in there?
It's crazy.
Yeah. So I'll start with this, man. How has your definition of manhood changed in that process?
Oh, man. I think one word I think I've learned is grace.
Mm-hmm.
I think my definition of manhood at the early stages of, I guess, independence was built on standards that I had for myself.
Right.
I'm a very driven individual, and that was cool until I failed.
Right.
And so, when you experience that first level of disappointment, you really have two choices. You can wallow in it, or you can give yourself grace and learn from it. And so I think over time, that's probably the one word I think makes the most sense for my journey, is just giving myself the grace to get back up, and the grace to forgive myself, the grace to learn and evolve. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Tell me more about that grace, though.
Yeah, man. I tell you, man. Like I said, I was, you met me in undergrad, and very, like I said, very driven. And then I got to law school, and it just sucker punched me. I mean,
everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, they say.
I was almost up out of there. I had to fight my way up out of there, and had never in my life experienced being away from home in a city. I was in Memphis, so
right.
I love Memphis. It was just me and my boy from Antioch, Tennessee. We were just out there trying to become men, and during that time period, that was probably some of the best life lessons I've ever learned. Sitting with myself in failure and disappointment in some instances, and giving myself the grace, really, to forgive myself, and to the grace to get back up, was my biggest experience, man. That's where I had to really learn. I'm still learning, but that's when grace. I think we grow up with these expectations of success. Doesn't account for the moments that don't make the highlight reel. You get what I'm saying? And it's really those moments that really make you who you are for the highlight reel. But growing up, all it was the highlight reel for me until you,
for sure,
you experience that you don't understand that first no, or that first situation where you really do have to pivot.
Right.
Is what I mean by grace. So
for sure. And I talk a lot about this, but everything that we do on this platform, and I think everything that we do all together is partially learning a lot of those lessons, but also being able to pivot as men. And we oftentimes have to pivot at very critical moments in our lives, which is everything that this is built for. And you talked a little bit about it here in the first two things that you said was you have to give yourself grace during disappointment. So help me understand what you mean exactly when you say give yourself grace during those periods potentially of disappointment.
Yeah, you are your biggest critic in most
Yep.
instances, and you are oftentimes your biggest opponent. Your mind, at least for me, I
Mm-hmm.
had to acknowledge how critical I was of myself, and it was clouding my judgment. When I say grace, it's not earned. It's something you're saying. Listen, I account for the fact that I'm human. I
Mm-hmm.
account for the fact that I don't have the ability to do everything I really would want to do in this moment, and it may have
Right.
been this moment, and I'm not going to sit here and wallow in kind of how I didn't meet that expectation. And so I'm going to
Right.
give myself the grace to say, hey, man, I choose to forgive myself, even though I don't feel like I've earned the right to get up. I
Mm-hmm.
want to
Yep.
stay here. I want to prove something to myself. And in some instances, you're not going to be able to prove whatever that is, whatever that standard is, needs to evolve.
Right.
And so when I say grace, that for me took that's and still I'm still growing, but for the last I think 6 7 years, that's where I've constantly had to in those moments not allow other people's definition of masculinity to put me in depression. You get what I'm saying?
Mm.
Like,
Yep.
or people's concepts of what they think I should be doing as a man, as a attorney, as a minister, as a I wear a lot of hats, and I finally had to say to myself, I'm going to give myself the grace and the space to evolve into what I feel like God is truly calling me to be, and I'm going to
Right.
accept. For me, I'm going to accept His grace, that in the fact that He could have thrown me away and said I wasn't good enough, but He's patient enough to account for my weaknesses. You get what I'm saying? So that
For sure.
that do
For
do it
sure.
with myself, man. Like, what I mean. We don't. I think as men, there are very few spaces where we can be weak.
Mm.
You get what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like
Yep.
truly, truly vulnerably weak without expectation of a resolve. You get what I'm saying? Just pure, hey, I'm not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep. For sure.
I don't need you to have an answer for me. I just need everybody to be like comfortable with me just not being okay for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it starts with yourself. You know what I mean? So that's for me, that's what that's to look like. And so I graduated law school. And I'll be honest, like that first year, man, I was struggling. Like it really, really dealing with depression, unmet expectations, and
Mm.
things of that nature, man. And I had to really learn how to give myself grace. For one, to forgive myself for the failure that I thought I had, and true to accept the grace of what may come in the future. You know what
Yep.
I mean? Certainties and just the reality that I'm not going to be able to do everything in of my own ability, and it's okay for me to really evolve and pivot into a space that I feel like is healthiest for me. And I'm still
Yeah.
dealing. Still, it's still a lesson. It's not anything I've learned. Right? I'm still learning that.
Yeah. Yeah. So you obviously are a minister, you're an attorney, and there's a lot that comes with either of those roles. So you're constantly carrying things on your shoulders. You talked a little bit about failure, generally speaking, and what life looks like during that process without the ability to be vulnerable. Walk me through what that looks like for you.
For me, at first, it was depression. Like I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have a space to without failure without the space of vulnerability is constant rehearsal and regret. You feel what I'm saying?
Mm.
Like it's constantly a cycle of regret that causes you to rehearse whatever you feel like you wasn't able to do. And
Mm-hmm.
so without that space of vulnerability, that I feel or safe spaces of vulnerability, it was constant rehearsal of regret. You feel what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe
Mm-hmm.
we've been saying this. First time I've even really just
Mm.
really like had a deep dive. I love this.
Yeah.
And so I had to first, get out of that rut of regret, that rehearsal,
Yeah.
and just acknowledge there's nothing I'm gonna be able to do about yesterday. You feel what I'm saying? There's
For
nothing,
sure. For sure.
nothing I can do. Oh, and I'm just gonna have to accept the possibility that I don't know what tomorrow holds, but right now in this moment, I'm gonna chop up these large expectations into realistic steps and say, okay, and I'm still learning this, so it's
Right.
what can I do right now? You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
as a man, what can I define right now that fits how I see it?
Yeah.
What can I define about my space and my reality? What can I define about my expectations? What expectations do I need to just kind of let die? You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
and be okay with that, even if that means relationships that I thought were built on those expectations don't evolve. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
And so as a even as a lawyer, because I'm preparing to practice as an attorney, but even as a lawyer, as a minister, in both instances, you taught how to deal with problems on all
Yep.
sides.
Yep.
So there has to be a level of comfortability seeing the ugly, and
Mm-hmm.
in both instances, using it to kind of paint a canvas, if you will, that
Right.
makes sense for more people than yourself. You feel what I'm saying? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so I've learned to find joy in the ugly, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
and build the canvas that I feel like is how I see getting out that problem. You know what I'm saying? That picture may look different for everybody, but at least I painted something that
Mm.
made the most sense from what was handed to me. And so
Right.
that I hope I'm making sense, but that's just
Nah,
that's
I mean it's the old proverbial saying: when life gives you lemons, you make
right.
lemonade. That's essentially
Exactly.
what it is.
You know what I'm saying? You give me some sour powder and some sugar, we gonna make some
Some
Kool-Aid.
Kool Aid, yes sir, yes sir. You gotta use what you have, man. Use the tools that you have. And you spoke a little bit about expectations there a second ago, and then also connecting that to painting a canvas. What type of expectations do you have for yourself in this exact moment?
Yeah, I want to have a better quality of life. So that's where I'm
Mm.
at. I don't have tolerance for spaces and habits that do not benefit me well. So
Mm.
in the process of examining every area of my life right now,
Mm-hmm.
whether
Mm-hmm.
that be my eating habits, people, anything I accept as a norm. I'm in because I want my expectation now is that I deserve a better quality of life without limitations caused by
Mm-hmm.
myself or other people.
Yep.
So that's where
Yep.
I'm at right now. So uncompromisingly saying in 5 years I'm going to be this, or in a year I'm going to experience, going to the store and not having to go in a big and tall section. Child, I
Mm.
can't wait. I don't know what I'm gonna do when I ain't gonna act right, but I deserve. You know what I'm saying? Like I
Yeah.
deserve. You know what I mean? To feel comfortable in my own skin, like, and so that's where I'm at now, man. It took a minute to
Yeah.
my approach now to that is different than what probably would have been 3 or 4 years ago. It's
Mm-hmm.
just making realistic steps. I think we talked about this. Just
For sure.
making realistic steps that it may not be big steps each day, but it's a step. You know what I mean? So
Yep. What was it that potentially sparked that change for you in terms of how you approach it?
man, let me be honest. I'm gonna be honest with you. It's gonna sound weird and funny, but man, I went to Universal Studios and couldn't get on the Harry Potter ride. And
Yeah.
I will never forget that because it wasn't nobody's
Yeah.
fault but mine. And that sounds
Yeah.
true, but
Yeah.
it was like I had, for me, and I'll probably write about this one day. The Miss Harry Potter ride, it was like it was just the perfect metaphor I had for my life at that point. It was I
Mm-hmm.
had talked so much, but I had unexpectedly taken on so much that I couldn't fit into where I wanted to go. I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
experience. That was a missed experience that I really wanted. And at that point, from that point on, I think I've continuously questioned, well, how can I guarantee that I don't miss that next, great experience? You feel what I'm saying? So that's that in that moment,
Mm-hmm.
that was my my trigger. You know what I mean?
Right.
Sitting there,
Yeah.
right? Like, yo, I'm at a point now where something has to change because I can't expect to get these experiences. And here's the reality about growing up. Even as a man, you have to realize no matter how the world makes you comfortable with certain things. You know what I'm saying? No matter how you try to justify certain things, you will miss certain experiences if you don't put the work in.
Yeah.
There's no way around. I think we live in this social media driven, reality, and it gives the illusion of quick success,
Right.
or you know what I mean, quick. It'll happen. But I've learned there's just no way around hard work.
Right.
It really isn't. Like it's no there's no shortcut around
Mm-hmm.
just just the grind. And so
Right.
when I missed the Harry Potter ride, that's when it was like, okay,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
wasn't the bar the first time. It was that Harry Potter. He couldn't get on. I really want to get on this ride, and I couldn't blame nobody but myself. I
Yeah.
had been, I've been eating too many burgers.
And so, what was interesting, just hearing you replay that back and how it happened for you. You said two things. You said something about responsibility, which we'll touch on, but you also said, and I'm gonna replay it back for you so you can hear what you said. You said I had taken on so much that I couldn't fit where I wanted to go. When you
Yeah,
hear that back, how does that compare to like your thought process and where you are right now?
it's justification for no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because right now, and I'm gonna be transparent. I feel like I'm having to make concessions for authentic boundaries. You get what I'm
Mm.
saying? Like I'm trying to please too many. Like if it's not serving me well and it's just not working, then
Right.
I'm okay at this point accepting authentic boundary because I never want to not fit where I want to go. If that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like even if
Yep.
it's taking on too many responsibilities, commitments,
Yep.
if it doesn't, like, and I'm giving myself permission in the next year to be selfish.
Right.
Just be honest with you. Like I've served, I've given, and I'm okay saying, yo, this is just not for me, and whatever comes with that, hey, come with me. At least I know
Yeah.
where I want to go. But like that,
For sure. For sure. And on the back end of that, like I said, you just talked a little bit about responsibility. And my belief is that when things happen in your life, regardless of how they came, you have to take responsibility for those things, because what I frequently say is it may not be your fault, but it is your problem. So how will you deal with it? And when I say that, a lot of people, there's a little bit of friction from people who hear that. But the reality is it doesn't matter what has happened in my life, what my circumstances are. They are my circumstances. So right now, in this moment, I have to be responsible whether I like it or not. So that responsibility word for me is something that hits hard because of all of these things that have transpired in my life, and me knowing that I had to pivot at a very critical time in my life. And the fact that I was able to pivot, I can look back and say that I'm proud of that moment. However, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to make that transition into just a completely different space. And so on the back end of that, I want to ask you, like, because I've talked to, of course, a lot of guys, you've talked to a lot of guys, just people generally speaking. What was that moment like for you in your life when you look at everything that has happened and you say, oh, well, shoot, regardless of how this happened, I have to be responsible? Do you happen to have a moment like that?
oh yeah, going back to law school, like I'm just that after my first semester, it was regardless of how this feels, I can either put up or shut up.
Yep.
I can
Yep.
either say, I go home, be done, or I can say, man, let's figure this out. I gotta be
Yep.
responsible. I'm here by myself. I don't want to quit. I've already invested too much. It's like you said, it either way you shake it, I gotta be responsible. So for me, the when I hear the word responsible, the word that's triggered responsibility for me is honesty.
Mm-hmm.
I've where I struggle. Like in moments where I'm not being responsible, a lot of times I tell I'm just not being honest about the
Right.
situation. And so,
Yep.
uh, honesty for me triggers responsibility. Just to
Yep.
be flat footed. Hey, this is what it is, and here's what we gonna do. Period. No,
Yep.
no excuses. Just what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you're not afforded a lot of excuses at the end of the day. And fact of the matter is, even if you use them, it doesn't justify anything. It doesn't change the situation, whatever that you're in. So none of that actually matters in the end, and it more than likely keeps you away from the destination in which you're hoping to reach. So you got to figure it out whether you like it or not.
Right. Exactly. Totally
So
agree.
next question for you is, how do you handle conflicts between traditional expectations of manhood and right now your current beliefs?
Yeah, I'm dealing with that from a Christian context. I am losing tolerance
Mm-hmm.
for traditional unjustifiable notions of masculinity,
Huh.
especially in sacred spaces, because it disservices the community and that traditional notion of masculinity was, in my opinion, built on the backs of those that were excluded. I mean, and so my tolerance for that, it triggers me at this point, and so
Mm-hmm.
I'm vexed when I hear some certain masculine beliefs that put us as in a place that we don't really deserve to be in. That
Yeah.
makes I just
Yeah.
I don't feel like I have to disparage other people groups to validate my masculinity. I feel like there
Right.
has to be a better way for us to frame masculinity without placing ourselves in a superiority complex. If that
Right.
makes sense. Well, from a religious standpoint, that's where at first, the first thing I'm thinking about is the tough conversations and things I've had to have in a religious space with things I just feel like we shouldn't even be arguing about. One example is, believe it or not, people are still arguing about the capacity of women to even, preach or proclaim the gospel.
Yep.
I struggle with that, bro. Like, why in 2024? I mean, again, I have no tolerance. I grew up, my great grandmother was a bishop in the deep Jim Crow South
Mm-hmm.
in like the 1950s and 60s, and so that's my context for quote unquote Christianity. That was my introduction, was through the lens of her legacy. And so
Yep.
my tolerance, I never was able to be comfortably fit into this dynamic. And the reality is, for black men, we are introduced in most cases to masculinity through a missing father or through a church substitute.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, that framework is either going to serve us well, or it's going to place us in a complex where we're having to constantly question kind of what the right footing where we should land. So
Mm-hmm.
as of right now, I'm at a place where I just want a construct of masculinity that respects and serves all. You get what I'm saying? Like where
Right.
everybody, where we can, not taking away from anybody, but that serves and respects the humanity of all people. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And you talked a little bit about the superiority complex that can come along with like a certain definition of manhood. Can you expand on that just a little bit?
Yeah, you hear things like, to be a man, you can't cry, and because the women cry, they're weaker. Or you hear
Yeah.
constructs like, they're the weaker vessel, you're the stronger vessel. Well, the the in my community, and I can only speak from my context, that creates an anxiety that has created an anxiety. Especially, I think what's currently playing out is, can you afford to be married, or can you afford to date?
Mm,
Or if
mm,
you're not economically feasible, you are disqualified and disfranchised from developing authentic, dare I say, intimate relationships.
right.
And my heart goes out to the cat that's working hard, doing what he knows to do best. May not be making six figures, but it's the best he's doing. He's grinding, and
Yep.
only to be met by a construct of masculinity that says he's not good enough. I don't
Right.
feel like that's fair. I feel like that's a capitalistic, hidden agenda definition of masculinity that disenfranchises people from just authentically meeting and talking to each other and developing
Hmm.
authentic relationships. And so that's what I mean. I don't feel like it's fair for the cats that don't want to be honest about themselves, have positioned themselves to be able to wag their finger
Right.
economically at others, to limit other people from authentically evolving regardless of what the standards that have been made. So I don't have a tolerance for it. And so
Yeah.
in those cases, I'm the guy that's probably going to be the one that puts on both the legal and the spiritual hat and challenge.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
doubt my expectations. So I'm just not I'm more and more not comfortable in those spaces. I'm just not. It's not serving me well. So that for me, even saying it now in this interview, even is a to say it
It's a
out
little bit of
loud.
fire. It's a little bit of fire that came up.
But I mean, I've had some conversations
Yeah.
recently. It should surprise people, but I'm just saying it out loud just to say,
Right.
look, if you thought I was comfortable, I'm not.
Yep.
I don't have to be so much of a disruptor. I try to preserve relationships and respect people's authentic beliefs. If that's what you believe, hey,
Yep.
in the process. But I'm going to be honest. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so that when I think of masculinity, that's my first thought is trying to figure out how we can construct it in such a way that doesn't disfranchise people. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. So, and just kind of hearing what you just said now, you spoke a little bit about relationships, right? So, talk to me about the importance of the way we define masculinity and how that impacts our relationships.
Yeah, I think not being dogmatic and our where we land. I think we got to respect people's context. Everybody has a
Yep.
different context, and everybody has a different introduction. Every man, in most cases, has some unique introduction. There may be similarities, but there are definitely differences in their introduction to manhood. I try to in my relationships not be dogmatic in where I am, if that makes sense. Not be so committed to what I thought or what I think
Mm-hmm.
that I'm not even open to hearing someone else's experiences or discrediting someone else's experience or definition of manhood based on what I think, based on the fact that I think I've just arrived somewhere and I have all the answers. I think that's a dangerous place to be. I try to
Yeah.
position myself to learn from anybody's experiences, and that way the conversation is mutually beneficial because I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think
For
it's an
sure.
evolution and understanding, if that makes sense. And so
Yeah.
that's when I say preserve relationships, just respecting people's context. You feel what I'm saying? Respecting
Right.
brother's context. When I say context, I mean where he came from, his time, his history, his experiences that led to the moment for us to converse together around the idea of what it means to be a man. And in those spaces, I feel like if we do that, in my experience, when I've done it, it's been a very healing and transparent space where I'm able to be. I can throw something at you that I probably in that moment felt comfortable throwing at you. You can throw something at me, and we can leave together with some nuggets or some construct that can serve us. You know what I'm saying? That can kind of help
Yep.
us move forward. You know what I'm saying? Instead of
Yep.
tearing each other down and we both stressed because we can't make each other's standards fit into our lives. That's stupid.
I mean, we like to stress each other out, brother. We like
We
to stress
do.
each other out in every possible way. So, what I'm thinking about right now is just kind of taking a step a little back a little bit. You talked a little bit about vulnerability earlier, and we kind of have talked about what that looks like throughout our conversation thus far. Can you help me understand, like in those spaces, what are some of those experiences where we possibly should be vulnerable, but because we're doing this constant rehearsal, we don't allow ourselves to be? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, as walking through and being honest about what's frustrating us. For me, you have a choice to make. I think
Yeah.
trust comes into play too, because I've seen it go well and I've seen it go bad. You know what I mean? Where as a man, you're like, man, I trusted you with that vulnerable space. You used it
Right. Right.
against
For
me,
sure.
and so I think dealing with the insecurity and the uncertainty and the risk of vulnerability is why in those spaces men would rather retract to discretion. You know, I think that's our default state. I'm going to use discretion in my honesty because I don't
Mm-hmm.
know how you're going to, I don't know how you're going to use it. You know what I mean? I may
Right.
not trust you, and I may be hurt so much in the past that I have no capacity to trust another man with this level of vulnerability because I don't want to get done like that again.
Right.
Um, I went through a season of that where
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't keep healthy friendships because everybody was the enemy.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
had to really here recently. I'm really healing from that. That's something I think in the last year and a half, and it took a good friend really challenging me and saying I'm not gonna stop calling you, to say and calling me out on it for me to realize, man, I do struggle calling people back. I do struggle, what I
Right.
mean, picking up the phone in my most vulnerable moments. I have retreated to isolation, because that made the most sense to me, and that's to the detriment of probably relationships that probably would have benefited me
Mm-hmm.
had I tried and made an effort and took the risk. And so that's for me, friendship. It's not a word I throw around a lot,
Right.
um, but in this moment, I value friendships because I'm taking a risk to trust you, and I'm not expecting you to be perfect, but I respect and trust you so much that even if you mess up, we're gonna bounce back. And I
Right.
trust you would do me the same way. You feel what I'm saying? So that's not an easy place to be for most men. I'll be honest with you. For
No.
me, I think most men.
No. I mean, it's not, and I think we see so much data that reflects that. I mean, there's this constant replay of statistics that play in my head, and it's from every aspect of mental health. For example, like I can tell you off the bat, there's CDC data that says 13.4% of men sought some sort of mental health treatment in the last 12 months. And this is probably data from 2022 that I'm regurgitating. But 24.7% of women sought some sort of mental health treatment in the last 12 months. Meanwhile, on the other side of that, men represent around 50% of the population, but 79% of suicides. So there's something to be said about like those data points, because one, we're not having the conversations with the people that are around us, but we're not having the conversation with anybody. Like, if anything, we talk about it at the barbershop, but that's about it. And we only talk about it at a certain level. So, like, when you hear those data points, like, talk to me about how that makes you feel currently sitting where you are.
In my space, I think our introduction to therapy has probably not been the best.
Yeah.
And so, like, trying to trust the process is, I think a lot of men are still trying to grapple with. I know I am because
Mm.
I need a therapist. I'm trying to process what that will look like for me.
Yep.
And so, you don't really have a lot of resources of people who've done it. And
Right.
so, and it could be hard. It's hard to broach that topic. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
ask somebody, hey, did you go get a therapist? Because of the stigma, it's
Right.
hard to even ask people around you what their experiences have been. I think we're getting a lot better at it,
Yep.
but I hear those statistics. I think it's because of the introduction and the lack of prevalence of even what exposure to what a therapist looks like, or what that
Mm-hmm.
feels like, or kind of what is the end goal, what's the deliverable. All those things I think are causes trepidation, causes people to
Yep.
kind of treat and say, I got so much going on in my life, I don't have the space to even try to figure out what to
Hey,
do. I mean, so that's when I hear, that's what I hear. You feel what I'm saying?
you know what's interesting is, and I've talked about it before. One of the reasons why I felt like during like my personal experience as far as the loss of brothers and everything else that happened for the last 2 or 3 years of my life, I felt that my ability, which had to come eventually, my ability to be transparent and vulnerable in moments that required that out of me, it allowed me to grow a lot more. But that's really what sort of saved me. And just going through that period when I'm trying to tap into a completely different space, I recognize that it was only through those things where I found out who I truly was. And there was a specific moment that happened in one of my sessions with my therapist, and I'm like literally trying to carry the weight of the world in every aspect of my life, from spiritually, mentally, physically, and financially. I'm just throwing myself all the way because my thought process was, I can handle it. I can handle it. I'll figure it out. Here I am, like Atlas, carrying the weight of the world. Meanwhile, I'm not understanding at in that process, I'm basically destroying myself and sacrificing myself when I didn't have to. And so I'm sitting in the therapy session, and my therapist says, "You would set yourself on fire so everybody else could stay warm." And after he said that, bro, I'm telling you the feeling that I felt in my chest. I'm like, wait, he's right. So where do I go from here? And I had to make a choice about what was going to happen in that part of my life, in that period of my life, that I was going to stop doing that. Now, was that transition easy? Heck no, because I was doing the same thing following that, but I went back to that in so many different places until I finally got sat down and said, hey, now you got to start over. And so for me, that was a very critical moment of my life. And just knowing that it required a level of disappointment, it required a level of not understanding, it required a level of isolation for a period where I knew if I didn't take the time to really process what had happened, I was going to be dangerous for people. And when I say dangerous, I meant like the way that I would speak, the type of energy that I bring in the room, the type of energy that I bring for a conversation, because I mean, I know how to communicate. So I know how to use my words. We know how to use our words. And oftentimes we've done that in ways that were likely not beneficial to us or any other party. And when I say we, I mean me during those situations. And when I was able to recognize that, I was like, all right, well, now it's time for you to step back and figure this whole thing out. So I took like 3 months off from social media. I took time to really lock in and just start doing work. But if it wasn't for me going through that process of therapy and really opening myself up to those conversations, I probably wouldn't even be having this conversation with you right now. So I say all of that to say, for me, that's what therapy gave me. And because I'm thinking at the end of the day, I hit the gym. That's how I deal with it. I hit the gym, and still I hit the gym. But why can't you just go to therapy too, bro? Like, because spiritually, I wake up, I meditate in the morning. Mentally, I read. Physically, I hit the gym. Why can't I do the therapy thing? It's just another avenue for me to have a conversation that I'm probably not having with anybody, because I feel like I have to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. And I think when I made that transition in my life, it helped me so much, bro. And I know I just kind of went on a tangent here, but I thought it was important to say that because I know we have the tendency to carry things, and we have the tendency to, again, take on the weight of the world. So if what I do, the conversations I have, what we are able to do together is help each other release and have a privilege to discuss these things with each other, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice if we don't. So that's my TED talk for today.
Man, listen, I needed all of that. I needed all of that, man. Oof.
Oh, brother, there was a lot. My heart is racing in a way, in a very positive way, because I know the value of that experience and what I went through. But with that said, I'm gonna make it a little bit lighter, just because I know there was a lot to digest, and I threw a lot at you. But I have to ask? What do you love about being a man?
Oh man, oof. What I love. I think the simple way we think. I ain't saying for me. I think I have to acknowledge and I have to appreciate, especially Black women,
Yep.
the complexities of what they have to survive and experience. Um, it is profound.
Yep.
In many ways that they adapt. My mom, my wife. I mean, just watching it happen is just profound. And so for me, I mean, I appreciate being able to witness that, and I also appreciate, I guess I appreciate I don't know. I'm not gonna say I appreciate that we don't have to go through it. I appreciate that is, that we get to witness that. And so
Yeah.
I appreciate what I appreciate about being a man more so than I appreciate what I've learned to appreciate about women. It's kind of way I would respond to that. So for me, I appreciate what I'm learning about the women around me, and it's showing me what it truly means to be a solid man in the life of those around me.
Mm-hmm.
As I develop that sensitivity to what women around me are dealing with. That's the best way I could probably answer that
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. And to that end, when you think about what women are consistently dealing with, and I'm not sure about this data specifically, like how it actually plays out, if there's some words that are not being said or some data that's not being submitted on our side as men. But what this data specifically said is that women actually deal with depression twice as much as men do, 2 or 3 times as much as men do. They just carried it a little bit differently. And the truth of the matter is, when you have certain partners, and this could be, an intimate partner or business partner, it could be someone along the lines of in a partnership with you, even as a parent. They just carry it a little bit differently. But when you're in alignment, it allows you to show up in all the ways that you're supposed to show up. And it takes a little bit of that weight off of your shoulders. And I think that's essentially what you're saying, if I'm understanding you correctly.
That's that's what year six of marriage. I've learned that, like, for real, like, you know, appreciating and being sensitive to the struggle and the grind and
Mm-hmm.
the so gymnastics that happen for women around me is helping me understand how to be a better man. Now, I will
Yep.
say I also appreciate as a man how we connect. How I think our connection is a little bit simpler. Like we could connect over LeBron versus
Oh
Jordan
yeah.
and develop a
Yep.
lifelong relationship.
For sure.
With a man, like I can appreciate, how I don't say easy, but how like forming that bond with other cats is as a man. That's pretty cool. The way we approach community is a little different, I think, in my experience than the opposite sex. So I do appreciate that. Not to
For
say it
sure.
don't happen that way, but in my experience, it seems like I could, a good head nod. I got cats I talk to this day. I think it started with a head nod. What's going on, brother? And we still talk. You know what I'm saying? Type thing.
Right.
So
Right. Right. So last question I'll throw at you is, and take your time answering this one because it's always interesting to see how people respond to it. But if you could define manhood in a single word, and of course you could expound on it, but I want you to give me one word as far as how you describe manhood. What would that be?
easy cultivation. Uh,
Cultivation. Why cultivation?
this is where I throw my other hat on. Yeah, so for me, uh, I have learned. I took my time reading Genesis 2
Mm-hmm.
and the conversation between God and Adam, and it changed my life and really helped me understand the value of being a man. So I think for me, a cultivator, the seed bearer, understanding how to develop an environment where you're conscious of everything in your environment. And
Mm-hmm.
that was Adam's job to name the animals, to really understand the DNA and the fabric of the garden, so much so that he could be in position to also create, is what has changed my narrative as it relates to a man. So when I think about manhood, I think about the opportunity to cultivate, to lead and
Right.
cultivate, and to be a cultivator of everything in my environment. To take ownership of that is how I see it. So the best men I've been around were not the loudest talkers. We're not the most talk. They didn't talk the most.
Right.
But their essence and their commitment to discipline and their perspective and perception of every room would involve some level of ownership of cultivating that space in their
Mm.
unique way. And that, for me, anytime I'm around a guy like that or a man like that, I'm immediately becoming a student because that's how I see true manhood. My father was like that. My father is
Yeah.
not doesn't talk a lot, doesn't doesn't have to be the loudest in the room, but he has his own unique way of cultivating every space he's in. So he naturally attracts a lot of men to get advice, not because he talks a lot, but because he's thoughtful and consistent and understanding of how to be significant in a space that will cultivate everybody around him. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's
No,
why I think father. So
I love that. I love that choice of word that you just used, and the expansion of which you described everything. I very much appreciate how you outlined that, brother. But man, I was excited to have a chat with you today, brother, and I'm glad we took the time to connect. But I want to give you the space right now to share your final thoughts and how people can find you.
yeah, man, I'm excited, man. I appreciate this. I needed this. You basically gave me a little gut punch on the therapy, so I'm gonna get on it. I needed all of that. I had this vision of my mind. The first session, I'm gonna be in there like, give me all the tissues because I'm gonna be in there.
Oh yeah. Be prepared. But
Yeah,
what I would say though is, like, I told people, I said I'll cry, but I'll still put the boxing gloves on.
all
So
day, every day. Don't put he is in the weight room. He play football. Please don't do
right.
it. So, but yeah, I'm honored to be in this space. I appreciate you for opening space to me. I am check me out. My DDM Inspires on Instagram, DDM Inspires on YouTube. I am on a little bit of a break to work with our production team because in the fall we're going to do some pretty amazing things, and it will be no pause at that point. So I
Yeah.
did a little bit of a soft launch in the spring with our kind of weekly Bible study called Monday Manna, and I'm excited about launching it again in the fall. So be on the lookout. Always Office Devos. I like to say Monday Man and Office Devos are cousins, and so they'll be playing together in the fall. So be on the lookout for that. Follow me now for exclusives. I will be dropping an email subscription program here soon to follow me, and the website is coming. So just be on the lookout. Be patient with me. A lot of you been hitting me up about Monday Man and give me a minute. I got to get this content right,
Yes,
and
sir.
I'll see you in August. Y'all tune in. D'Antoine on Facebook. So I know that's a long name, so good luck finding me. But if you find DDM Inspires,
Oh,
you'll find me on Facebook. Put it like
for
that.
sure. Oh man, I knew you'd be ready for that one. I knew you would be ready. But D, it's been a privilege, man, to discuss everything that we've talked about today. We've, of course, talked about how mindset and discipline shape the essence of manhood and how these elements offer us the freedom to redefine what it means to be a man in today's world. Remember, discipline equals freedom, and while manhood can look different for everyone, the core values of authenticity, resilience, and integrity remain universal. We are the disciplined man, and this is what real men think. D, appreciate you, brother.